I'm here.
Hello,
Hello, hello, hello, hello.
A bit late. No, we planned to come in a little bit earlier. I'm sorry, I've had a bit of trouble getting in. But,
Don't worry.
Here we are.
There's me panicking that it's the first time I've actually done one of these, so.
It's not you, it's me. I'm so sorry. So you're not waiting for me, wondering where I am. No, I think there's too many people in this house online, so the bandwidth doesn't go that far. Anyway, we're both in.
Yes, we're here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, and I can always make you louder if I want you to. That's for my purposes, not yours.
I do like your glasses.
Thank you.
Oh yeah.
They're a French company.
Very nice. Well, people are just coming in now. Let me see the time. We're probably about bang on.
It's quite interesting, actually, because my great plan to tidy up hasn't really materialised as well as I'd hoped it would. So it's good you can just see a close-up.
Drape. You just get like a big blanket and you just drape. That's what we do.
Yeah. Well, yes, I know. It's dreadful, actually. But it's okay.
The art. Can't see anything. No messiness, just artwork. That's all we do.
A lot of artwork. Or if I go like that, then you can really see it's all over the floor. Can you see? It's really messy.
No.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. That's what it's supposed to look like.
No, it's not supposed to look like a pristine, is it?
No, not at all.
See you, and I say apologies again for being a little bit delayed with the IT, and hopefully my children will stay off. I'm just
going to do a quick wave because I think my friend from Oman has joined, so I'm really thrilled from Muscat. So, hello.
Got a few people are coming in. So, somebody's just said, Rachel, lower your volume a little, but it might not suit you to lower.
I can try. Sorry, am I sounding like I'm shouting? I'll tell you something. I don't know how I can lower it. I'll try and speak a bit quieter. I'm supposed to wear hearing aids, but in lockdown it seems so strange to wear hearing aids because I'm not speaking to anybody and nobody's speaking to me. So I don't bother to put them in. So then I turn up my. Is that better?
It's fine for me, Rachel. I mean, I don't know how other people are hearing it. Can we get some feedback from anybody who's on the call? Is everyone seeing us and hearing us?
If I sound really loud, I'm going to try and be a little bit quieter. I've got a loud voice sometimes, so forgive me. Turn your volume down. That might help.
No, it sounds good. People are saying it sounds good. All good. So, should we make a start as people start to join? So, my name's Kate. I'm the director of Big Draw, and we've been doing a whole series of these very regularly, probably about one a week, I reckon, really, as part of the Drawing in Conversation series. And this week, I am very excited to have my friend and my colleague, and indeed one of my trustees, multi-hats tonight, Rachel Gadsden. And I'm going to let Rachel, if you can introduce yourself.
So my name's Rachel Gadsden. I'm a visual and performance artist. I'm also a trustee of the Big Draw, which I'm very proud to be because I'm very passionate about drawing and always have been. So it seems a really relevant place to be involved in this sort of way. So it's lovely to be here this evening, to be with Kate. To actually be on this side of the table rather than in a boardroom, which is another role. It feels very nice to be in a creative space with Kate this evening. And I'm just really thrilled. I can see, my friend from Palestine's joined, and that's what I love about these events, that we can just sort of connect everywhere. And, it feels really precious. So thanks very much, everybody who's here listening in. I really appreciate it.
And what we'll do is, if it's lovely for the people who are joining us live, that's fab. But also, it will remain on the Big Draw Instagram live as a resource, as an asset, so people can come back, return to it. And also, we will save it to the Big Draw YouTube account. So people will be able to revisit it and use it as a resource if they aren't able to hop on this evening. So that's fine. Now, as we go through, we're going to be just under an hour here. So we're finishing just before 7:30. If you do have questions and you want me to put them to Rachel, do put them in the copy of the text. I'll try and thread them into the conversation as we go along. if we can. If we can't, then we can always follow up with another session, or just get in touch with me or Rachel direct, and we can get back to you. So they go quite quickly, and we find the whole session tends to fly by quite quickly. So I wanted to just pick up on something you just started to say, Rachel, which was talking about bringing everybody together. And I was wondering whether we might start there. I've got some of the scribbles, the notes I made from when we've chatted previously. And the thing that I have got a big ring around is connections, bringing people together, and a sense of humanity and survival. And I mean, I know that your work is multifaceted, it's often interdisciplinary. And I know that your work, people can define in different ways or put certain labels on it, however they might want to think about it. But the bottom line is, your practice is about exploration of the humanity that we all share and what we have in common. And I wonder if that's a good place to kick off from, because I think it encapsulates that sort of interdisciplinary, connecting, dynamism, and also the international following that you have. So is that a good place to start?
Yeah, it's a really good place to start. Not everybody knows this, that I actually spent my formative life living in the Middle East. And so going to different countries and not being in England was very much part of my heritage. And so I think I grew up not necessarily feeling I was British or English or whatever that means, but actually just being someone. And because of that, I always felt that I wanted to mix with different cultures and different people. And then latterly, when I came back to UK, I didn't really feel very British either. That felt very strange as well. And I think what's always been really important to me with my work is that rather than sort of feeling that I'm sort of this person in this world, I often just feel I'm a piece of dust in this world, and that there's this huge universe around, and that we all share this sense of humanity and this sense of who we are. And so rather than ever looking to point out any differences that people may have, I'm always looking for the things that unite us and the things that draw us together as human beings. Very much I work with the human. I work with the sense of survival really because of my own circumstances, and the sense of living another day, and the sense of being able to continue to practice, to research, to find things. And, you know, I set out as an artist to hopefully maybe be able to show one painting. I never believed that my practice would take me to the places it has. So for me, it's just a constant delight to feel that I can be a voice amongst many other people rather than just my voice being there. You know, it doesn't feel right to just be here on my own. Otherwise, I'm just making work about me, which would be very boring.
Oh, I don't know. And I think one of the things that you've talked about as well, and it's interesting because I always think of you as an incredibly tough lady, you know, in every way, actually. But when we've talked about things previously, we've talked about humanity, we've also talked a little bit in terms of celebrating those commonalities across humanity, but also the fragility of that, and thinking about that. And it's so precious, and that we do need to take care, we do need to be kind to each other, we do need to be more understanding, and thinking about those themes around better understanding each other, commonality, fragility, survival. Again, those themes, I know you explore those in different ways across sort of multidisciplinary work that you do all around the world.
What I often think is that, I mean, I'm sure lots of people already know this, but, you know, I've lived with, you know, a very chronic medical condition all my life. I'm kept alive by a machine that's injecting me every minute to support my breathing. So that sense of just being alive is something that I experience on a very day-to-day basis. But rather than ever thinking of it in a negative way, what I've always felt is that it gives me a sense of being alive, which I think is precious because we can't take it for granted. And actually, I think this year has really shown all of us in many different ways how precious every day is, because nobody knows what's going to happen. But because of that, I also feel that, you know, my experience is a particular experience, but we're all fragile and we all have our own things that we have to deal with. And actually, if we can sort of come together and share those experiences, it unites us in some way. And I suppose because my medium happens to be art and it's the thing that I communicate through, I've used my own practice as a means of being able to contribute to cultural change, to try and contribute to some of the difficulties that disabled people have to experience existing, and the discrimination. But that extends out into a much broader sense. You know, I've worked a lot with refugees recently, and their situation is very, very tragic. So it doesn't really matter who you are. It's just trying to find ways to communicate who we are as humans. And of course, you can't have fragility without also having survival and hope, because that's equally important. Because if there's no hope, we have no reason to stay alive. So they go hand in hand always.
I think it'd be good to return to some of those themes, but just in terms of bringing, because I mean, I don't know, it may be that many people on the call or people who will watch it subsequently may know lots about you, or they may not know very much about you. So one of the questions we tend to ask most of the individuals that we chat with is just thinking a little bit more about how they got where they are. So, and I know that when we're thinking about what a fine art route might be in, yours is quite an interesting one.
I didn't go to a gallery till I was about 18. Yeah. I didn't even know there was such a thing as being an artist, really. My parents had no idea about galleries or anything like that. They gave us loads of experiences and lots of imaginative experiences, but certainly the notion of being an artist wasn't part of my vocabulary. But I did begin to realize that I was artistic and didn't know how it would materialize. I'm an identical twin, and my twin sister's is a classical musician. So obviously there was some creative thing going on between us. And in fact, I actually went to theatre school when I was 18 rather than to art college, having sort of spent a couple of years really doing an awful lot of art. And my lungs failed quite significantly. I trained as a method actor and then was touring, but my lungs all the time, I've been resuscitated many times, and my lungs were becoming very, very problematic. And because of that, I realized that maybe to sustain an ongoing career through theatre was going to be quite difficult. So I'd always painted, and I don't ever remember stopping acting or starting painting, but there was this sort of transition, and one became the other. And then I took on creating full time, and then actually didn't go to art college till I was 30, when I realized I didn't want to paint big decorative pictures for the rest of my life. Not that I don't like decorative pictures. I think they're amazing. I still do plenty of them, but I did feel that I wanted to say something, and I felt that I needed to say it in a tougher way, and that required me to go and understand a bit more about philosophy and maybe other things like that. So that's the route I went.
That more rounded way in has enriched your practice and benefited you in a whole range of different ways.
Going to art college, do you think? Did you say?
No, there's a slightly the broader perspective that you've come in. You haven't necessarily come in through a very traditional.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, definitely, because I think that I mean, when I went to Wimbledon School of Art, and it was quite interesting. I was terrified. I thought I'd be the oldest student there. You know, everybody was going to be 18 or 19, and I'd be 30, and be the granny on the course. And I got there. Well, you know what you're like when you're that age. You think everybody's who's a year older is old. But actually, when I got there, I realized that the whole year was made up of, every different age possible. And there were younger people, older people, much, much older people, retired people. And actually, it was really exciting because people had so much to say and so many things to talk about.
They've got that lived experience. It's worth so much, isn't it? To live
it's true. And I think also, I mean, anybody who's practicing as an artist knows this is a very, very tough profession to be in. And I think it's really almost impossible to graduate as a 21, 22-year-old unless some amazing thing happens and you're offered a huge exhibition or a big opportunity. But even if you are, it doesn't necessarily carry on. So I think actually if I'd had my own children, I wouldn't necessarily have suggested that they went to art college at 18, even if they'd have wanted to, because I think it's really tough. And I think by the time, you know, I was exhibiting before I went to art college. So when I came out of art college, having carried on exhibiting and doing stuff, I was sort of running straight away, as opposed to thinking, what do I do now? So it was a slightly different experience, and that's how it worked for me. I don't necessarily also think art college is necessary. You know, I work with a lot of people because of the projects I work on who have never gone to art college, never learnt any traditional art, who are great artists. And you don't...
Well, yeah, I think there's a misconception out there that very many talented and successful people have gone to art school. It's great, they have. There's lots of different ways in. It's not a criticism. There's lots of different routes, isn't there? And
yeah, it's just one of those things. And, you know, it's a privilege to have the opportunity to go to art college.
Yeah,
it's an utter privilege, because most people don't have that opportunity.
Yeah.
And so if you do, it means that you have some time to try out your practice while you're in a supportive environment. But a lot of people don't have that opportunity around the world. So
Emily has said it's never too late to start a new beginning. I like that.
It's absolutely true. And the really good thing about art is there's no barriers with age. You can carry on painting till the day you die. So there's nothing that ever should stop you from actually being a painter or any form of an artist. I think, you know, maybe a dancer, it would be slightly different, but you can find another way to move. So I think, you know, the parameters are far greater. Yeah. People often ask me, when am I going to retire? And I mean, it's just not even in my consciousness. You know, retire? You don't retire when you're an artist.
Oh, blimey.
Yeah.
So just threading on from that, so just thinking about going back to visual thinking, visual literacy, drawing, that's a very big question maybe, but what does drawing, mark making mean for you? Because I'm a big fan of your work. Your work is incredibly dynamic. It does capture a lot of the sense of movement and change in it. But you can see that drawing the line is very important to you. It does feature in a lot of your work.
I mean, I've always drawn, but obviously I wasn't a trained drawer to begin with, and I'm not sure, I don't know whether we're trained to draw, but what I've always loved most about drawing is that it's the one thing that you can do with really very little, and in any place, wherever you are. And obviously I have lots of times when I'm in hospital or things are very, you know, I don't have access or I can't be in a studio, but I can always usually hold a pencil, and I can usually hold a piece of paper, and that's a way of notating. And I also feel, as I've sort of progressed as an artist, that drawing is a way into my consciousness. And it's almost as if when you're drawing, you know, if we're ever doodling or scribbling away, you open a passageway, which means that you open a space into your subconscious that allows a much bigger story that you're not in control of to come out. And I find that when I'm drawing, I can open that space, and often I have no idea where my artwork's going. And afterwards I think, oh my goodness, where did that all come from? But there's this whole history, memory, emotions, thoughts that go on in your mind all the time, and that somehow drawing allows that to happen. Which is why when we talk about visual literacy, I feel that it really is about visual literacy, and it's about how your brain is sort of jumping around and manipulating. And I absolutely believe that if you draw every single day, you really keep on top of things. It's a bit like being a sprinter and training every day. As an artist, you actually need to keep that training up and be training fit as an artist. But that can be through drawing, painting, even if it's for a few minutes. It keeps that passageway open.
Be a quick bit of sketching, or it doesn't have to be, does it? It's just doing something,
or just marks, or because I know that if I don't draw very regularly and then I start drawing, it feels really, it's like a car that can't move, you know, and you've got to try and get your energy up again to get to that space where it just happens. And it could just be making one amazing mark.
And it could just mean something to you. It doesn't have to be aesthetically pleasing for whoever else is on
No, never think about it being for other people.
No.
Doesn't work.
For yourself, absolutely. One of the things that I had jotted down at one of the notes, when you were starting to talk about, drawing into the subconscious, talking about visual and thinking about visual and visual literacy, and also sort of our inner eye and how we all perceive things. Now, one of the things that we've talked about before, and I just think it's so interesting, is we all perceive things differently, but obviously you have some challenges around your vision as well. And over the years, that has become, I know, a little bit more challenging. One of the things that you were talking about today, which is this idea of how your senses may alter, but it can enrich your practice in ways that you maybe never previously anticipated. And I think one of the things I wrote down was that you said is not ignore it, embrace it. So I was wondering if you would be happy to talk a little bit more about that. It's so fascinating.
It's really interesting, because when I first found out that I was losing my sight, I really couldn't believe it, as any artist or anybody who's earns their living or works very closely with their eyes would feel the same. And I remember I was at Moorfields, and I was being told the full reality of what was happening. And there was an Italian consultant at the time who was talking to me. I was sobbing, I was crying a lot. I won't pretend. I was just in an emotional state. And he just sort of said to me, "What are you crying for?" And I said, "Well, I'm so shocked that this is happening. I'm aware that I knew something was happening, but I just can't get my head around it." And he just said, "Well, why?" He said, "There's so many artists around the world that we see them here all the time that have sight problems, very many famous artists." And he said, "Anyway, you don't make your work through your eyes, you make your work through your soul." And I sort of was thinking, "Oh, that's quite a nice idea." And I think just having that tiny bit of confidence at that moment, I came away and I just thought, well, I better get on with it then. It doesn't really matter what I see or I don't see. But actually, as it's carried on, and I spoke about this sense of your consciousness, our imagination is greater than anything we'll ever see. And I now feel that if I enter a forest, because I do work very much visually, I'm stimulated by visual stimulation. If I walk into a forest, that forest becomes alive with partly what I see and partly my imagination. Yeah. So the artworks that emerge from those places are actually 10 times more exciting than they probably were when I could see every single twig or every single leaf or every single, I don't know, bird or whatever was in the tree. I sort of get a much greater sense of space, of being there the whole. I don't think my senses for 1 minute have become heightened in any way. I'm not sure they have. It would be a nice thought. I don't think I have a better sense of smell, or I don't think I feel things better. But what I absolutely do feel, I'm always saying to my husband, "Oh my God, this is so amazing. This is just, oh God, look over there." Oh, and I know he sometimes thinks, "What's she looking at?" But it's because there's this sort of, something's broken down and it feels so incredibly powerful. And I have it in my studio, I have it wherever I am, and the world just feels so alive that maybe I wasn't so conscious of before.
A lot of people, and it may be, I can imagine you saying to me, "Oh, I'm not," but there'll be people thinking, "Oh, she's so inspiring," and you're but because I know you're like, "Oh, I'm just getting on with it, I'm just cracking on," and because I know that that's how you are. You're very tough, you're a hard worker. But one of the things I wrote down as well that I loved was, you were saying the other day was, what you actually said was, when you lose your sight, you don't draw through our eyes, but we draw through our brains and imagination, and we find our subconscious voice, which is exactly what you were just saying. And it's very beautiful, but it's just so interesting, isn't it? It's just that we all are, all of us who have our sight, our full sight, I think we're so reliant on that in so many ways. And it's almost like but then there's a whole inner visual world that we all have, that we could all be exploring and then externalizing a lot more. So I
think I won't ever pretend, I was born with sight, so I had so many years of complete sight. I also strangely enough, I worked at a school, one of the R&IB schools, when I came back to London. I don't know, maybe about 25 odd years ago, and I was there with many young people who'd lost a huge amount of their sight. And at the time, I didn't have sight problems and couldn't even perceive that I would have sight problems, but I was artistic. And they very quickly said to me, "Oh, why don't you do loads of art with the young people? They'd really love that." And there was a lady who did craft with beads and stuff like that. Well, I thought, I'm no good at making jewelry or anything. So I got big bits of paper out. And actually, it became a massive thing that all they wanted to do was paint and draw, because actually it was a very physical process. And when they were making that, they were making, rather than sitting there threading beads, actually when they were making paintings, it was very full and free. And they felt that somehow they were transferring their own inner energy onto the paper and created extraordinary works. So I sort of think that maybe also I'd seen some of those things. I also had a scholarship to Italy, and I spent a couple of weeks with Sagi Man. Again, at the time, I didn't know I was going to lose a lot of my sight. And I became Sagi Man's sort of like right-hand person, because we had this stool, and if I stood on it, I became his height. And I became his eyes for him, because he's a landscape painter and creates extraordinary landscapes and interiors. And we used to talk all the time together, and I knew that he saw things differently. So maybe I had a little bit of an insight into how things would be. But I did come home from the hospital, and I made a sculpture with my eyes closed. I just had to do something to make me know that I could transfer whatever it was that I did into another medium if I needed to. I just got, I worked on it for quite a few weeks, and I just think I needed to know that somehow it was going to come out in a different way. And in fact, I haven't really done any sculpture since, a few bits of sculpture, but you find your own way.
You find your way. One of the things I was going to pick up on, you talking about that sort of physicality, that energy, and there is a performative aspect, isn't it, to when you're in your work and you're full throw. It's amazing to watch. It's big, it's sort of out there, it's bold, the colours, it's very confident with the lines, but it's sort of a whole body immersive thing in some ways, and then you sort of do all this swirling, and then you sort of step back and you just think, oh, wow, look what she's done. How did she do that? I think it's very beautiful to watch the process as well. It does certainly, from an external perspective, it does look like a very immersive experience for you as the artist.
I suppose some of that's probably come from my theatre, my original theatre background. But even now, when I'm on my own in my studio, it's how I work. And I think it's also to do with the sense that if you make a small mark and it goes onto the page, the viewer sees that mark. And because we have this innate ability to understand marks without necessarily knowing what they are, something in our brain tells us it was produced in a slow, gentle, quiet way. If you throw paint on a canvas, as we saw with Jackson Pollock and many of the other very expressionistic artists, that process of throwing also shoots back at the viewer when they see that work. And I think I do totally embrace that sense that if I become completely submerged in the process of making, that will also somehow become embedded in the artwork. And then when the viewer sees it afterwards, maybe I've long gone away from it, and they're seeing it in a gallery on its own, that also comes back. And I think that also picks up from the sense of wanting to show being alive. Because, the stillness of life happens when we're no longer here. That's the reality of it. So I suppose I'm also wanting to capture that whole essence of consciousness onto the drawn page, whether it's tiny or big.
I can see you getting a lot of hearts, Rachel.
Oh, thank you.
Loads of hearts.
Thank you.
Pushing up.
Keep sending loads of hearts. I'm sending you all loads of love.
Lots and lots of hearts. So
please also remember, it can often seem when I'm doing a conversation like this that that I sort of dance about and jump in my studio all day long. You know, I actually don't. I also spend a huge amount of time where I'm reflective and thinking about things, and I don't always sleep. And so at night, I spend a lot of time just thinking about why I'm making work, what the work's about, what it's trying to say. And I really think it's valuable. Those times are as valuable as the time you're making your work. But when I do decide to make the work, it becomes a whole process.
Yeah.
You know, I mostly stand if I can stand. It's very immersive, without any doubt.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that we can move on to some of the current projects. I mean, it'd be great to talk a bit about Deluge, but some of the international projects that you've been involved with have been incredible. I mean, there's a few that, I mean, if I can hand it over to you, is there any particular project or projects you want to talk a bit about? I know you've done a lot of international working with women in sort of really challenging environments.
Oh gosh, it's just, I'm just thinking about this because I know that Amna Ali Hussein's here, and that's a Palestinian project that I've worked on for a very long time with my Palestinian artists, and the sense of the lives that they've lived. And I'm still very closely in connection with all of the artists there. I've also, today actually, I got a message, I think probably because it had come up on the big draw, from Nondamiso Hawili, and that was a Cultural Olympian project I did. And I worked with Nondamiso and the Bambanani group on a project all to do with HIV and AIDS, and the fact that they were surviving their HIV and AIDS treatment, antiretroviral treatments, keeping them alive minute by minute, in the same way that my medical treatment was keeping me alive. And we came together having lived very different lives, but actually sharing this huge humanity and understanding that, you know, every day mattered. And interestingly, the way I found Nondamiso was because I went to an exhibition in Cambridge. I was on an international drawing symposium, and I saw a body map that had been done by Nondamiso. And I was looking at this picture, and I just knew this person who'd created this artwork was surviving. And I didn't know who'd made it. I had no idea about it. And I came away and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And the lungs were bandaged. She had this picture of lungs and they were bandaged. And I just knew she knows what it feels like to not be able to breathe. And I searched for her. And I think I literally wrote hundreds and hundreds of messages to people all over the world, and then found out that she was in Kailicha Township. And one day I got an email message to say, I'm Nondamiso and you've been looking for me. And that became the basis of my Cultural Olympiad bid project for Unlimited, to go and work with them, and for us to really disseminate what it was and what it mattered to us about being alive, and how we can communicate that to sort of show a shared humanity that lots of people were experiencing at the time. But I'm also, you know, I'm thinking of, I did Al Noor Fragile Vision, which was working with really amazing artists in the Middle East. Quite often in the Middle East, I have worked on a lot of projects that are purely led by women. It's been really important to me to make sure that women who don't normally have a voice can have a voice, and where they become the main focus of the work. And so that's how I met Sophie Sophia from Oman, and we've worked very closely together. And often also being open about, you know, our challenges and our difficulties as disabled people, and how we live our lives. Because actually, you know, it's not about our disability. That doesn't really matter. It's more about actually, this is what we do, and to try and break down some of those barriers.
Yeah. I mean, I know you talk about that a lot, but it's an aspect. It's not a defining, you know, you're an artist. You are not. Yeah. It is a very interesting. So just going back to some of the other themes that we were talking about. One of the things that we've touched on previously is, in terms of thinking about disability as well, have you experienced, I mean, what have been some of the challenges that you've had to experience over the years, sort of in terms of where you've got to where you are now?
I if people see me in the street, I don't look like I have any disability. So my disabilities are all unseen, or they're hidden.
Yeah.
But they're very complicated, and they cause me a lot of issues. Well, not issues, but challenges in my life. And because of that, I can't travel on my own. Obviously, I can't drive or anything like that now, but I require oxygen to fly. You can't fly on your own if you need oxygen. And there's this it sort of starts multiplying very, very quickly. And of course, if you're an artist who's commissioned and then you've got to be taking somebody with you, that all becomes about access. And here in UK, there are some, there's access to work support and different things that support that. But in lots of countries, isn't anything like that. So I've often found that I've had to sort of fight my way through some of these barriers to be able to just undertake and do the work I want to do. And through that process, I've ended up becoming an activist to make sure that whoever is trailing behind me and is an emerging artist won't have to go through those same challenges, and actually have to be very open about their medical condition when they don't really want to be, because actually nobody will support how it is. And I also know that there was a point that I hid because I could. And I feel very bad about this, because I know that lots of my colleagues and friends and people I know around the world can't hide their disabilities. But I did hide because I was very focused on wanting to be an artist, wanting to have a career. And I was so terrified that if I admitted I had a problem, that I wouldn't get a commission. And at the time, I wouldn't have done. That's how it was. It's slightly changed now. It's slightly better. And I used to get my machine and wrap it up so nobody could hear it in interviews. Or if I was sort of doing presentations, it used to be very noisy. And every time there was an injection going in, it made quite loud noise. It was visible. And I remember I was invited to go to Hampton Court Palace because they hadn't had an artist since Holbein. And they were going to have an artist actually be in the palace for a year or whatever. And somebody had seen my work and I was invited to go and talk to them about it. And I remember through the interview process thinking, I'm going to have to admit what goes on in my life. And there were things they kept asking me. And then I went away for a few weeks. I made work. I came back. It was a process that went on. And then I just decided from now on, I'm just going to be who I am. I don't have to be ashamed of my situation. And actually, I sort of see it as a necessary need, because one day we won't have to say we're disabled people, because it will all be easy. But until that moment, I have a responsibility as somebody who has a public voice through my work to actually stand up and be counted. And hopefully that will break down some of the barriers for other people.
It's that whole thing, and this is what I always, we've talked about this before, if you have yourself or have access to any sort of public platform, then use it well, isn't it? Do what you can. And it's interesting, talking about almost an accidental activist. It wasn't a chosen, it's sort of fallen upon you in some ways.
Well, it's quite interesting. I heard, this is just straying a little bit, but we obviously woke up this morning, heard that not poor old, but Meghan Markle had suffered this year. And then there's a lot of conversations going on about it. And I thought, gosh, how hard it must have been to have to be so public about something that's such a personal thing. But then absolutely admiring her for being honest, open, and for putting something very personal out into the public domain. Because I know how much that will have supported many women and men around the world who've also suffered in the same way. And actually it brings a very important conversation into an open platform.
For sure.
And where there may be more support and there may be more understanding. And I suppose it's that same role. She's very brave she has been throughout her career, making sure that she stands up for the rights that she has to stand up for. And I suppose that's maybe, obviously I'm nothing like her, but it's a model that I believe I have a responsibility to make sure that things are easier for the next generation of artists or the next generation of creatives. They have an easier way.
I think you are an inspiration. I know you will tell me off for that later, but I think you are. I'm sure many people will think you're inspiration. I mean, and your work is beautiful. It would be fantastic just to hear a little bit about your current projects. You're working on something at the moment called Deluge, aren't you? With a number of, it's a sort of a collaborative approach, isn't it? With a number of other really amazing artists as well, international. It'd be good to maybe talk a little bit more about that.
Well, Deluge came about earlier this year. I got a very small COVID-19 grant from Disability Arts Online. It's a platform I've been really familiar with, and I really seriously asked people to go and have a look at the work of Disability Arts Online. They've been in existence for a very long time, really the forerunners of disability art. And they knew that once the pandemic hit, that it was going to be necessary to find a way to sort of keep encouraging artists to work. And I just put in a very small proposal. There was a call out for proposals. And at the time, I'd had very major surgery, spinal cord surgery, and had been isolated for about 4 or 5 months. And then just as I was beginning to be able to walk again and do the things that I wanted to do, I got told I had to go back into isolation because of an intensive treatment I now have to have very regularly. And there was like this massive surge that was going on. And I'd heard about COVID probably in December. I was beginning to be aware of it because I was working with a group in Hong Kong, and they were telling me there was this big virus coming and I was supposed to be going there and be careful and just follow it. And so I decided that I'd create a piece of work that would really look at issues of a surge of a virus that was coming and was probably going to go right the way across the world. But I knew I wanted to work with artists in different countries. And I knew I wanted to do something that was probably quite performative at some point, but knowing that actually we couldn't be in a performative space. And so I invited Jeremy Hawkes, who's an Australian artist, to be part of the commission. We've been working very closely together for the last year. An artist called Sufeng Jung from Hong Kong. And I'm working also with Colin Hambrook, who's a poet, writer, artist. Freddie Myers, who's a musician, composer, Emily Earle, who's an amazing violinist, and also Stacey Stockwell. And we're creating a piece that really is our own interpretations of what has gone on through lockdown in our own different environments, but trying to give a sense of how it's a collective voice. And although it could be perceived that I'm the person that's driving and leading this piece, it's very not being done that way. And we meet very regularly through Zoom, strange times of day to suit all of our timelines because we're all in different places, and discuss the next stage and where we're going with it. And yes, it's unfolding bit by bit. It's very, very exciting piece, and it will one day hopefully be a big performance.
People to, I mean, it was a pleasure to watch one of the videos, one of the live sessions. I think it was on Facebook the other day, but I'm sure it's sat on YouTube or something somewhere. Disability Art Online.
Yeah, there's definitely there's a whole lot of blogs about how we've worked bringing this piece together and what we're thinking about. And then we're going to be showing an iteration of it on the 3rd of December, which is International Day of People with Disabilities. And then it will just keep building as it grows into a much bigger piece. It's been very much a research and development piece at the moment. But I mean, ultimately, we would hope to all be on a stage together, creating this multimedia piece. It's sort of created through drawing, through performance, digital mark making, all of us coming at it in different ways. Sufeng Jung is an artist who doesn't have any arms. And so she's working with her body, and also she draws with her feet. But again, he's a very physical artist as well. I saw a video yesterday of this drawing she's done. It's just blew my mind away. It's so extraordinary, and sort of really captures this sense of how she has experienced the pandemic, being in an enclosed space, not being able to walk, which was obviously her main means of moving around, and be sort of stuck in a tiny space. But we're all working at it in a different way. And it's been a really dynamic piece to create.
I would encourage everyone to check it out. We have got a question from Zoe about role models, which I will definitely ask, I promise, Zoe. But I just wanted to ask Rachel something just in follow-up to the collaboration with the artist, because with something that a Big Draw, a project that a partnership that we've been working on over the last few months over at House of Imagination, Forest of Imagination, our lovely friends over there, was very much of an ilk that I know that you've been working online. So, artists coming together every week, coming on Zoom, collaborating, having those creative conversations, thinking about, and I think the way that I would describe it was one of the really interesting, unexpected side effects of that was we started to see a sort of organic blurring almost of the different disciplines, the different artists' work into each other. And actually, even though we've all been distant so much, but with COVID and we're all having to work in this new way, it had, to be honest, it had really helped them in some ways really come together in a very close way as well. There was some real positives. I mean, I know it's not a perfect medium. There are lots of things that it doesn't do very well, but there were certainly some real positives around that about how it enriched their practice. And it would be great to hear a bit more about how because I mean, there'd be more artists working like this. How have you found that process? I mean, have you found it that it has enriched the individual art? Has there been a bleeding, a blurring across of any sort between?
Oh, yeah, no, there has completely. I mean, all three of the visual artists have now all created their first graphic scores, which we're working with the musicians to create. And I mean, if somebody said to me, I can't even read music. My twin got the music bit without any doubt. And, to think that I would actually create something that is very much inspired by the sounds that I hear in my head and the impetuses that I hear, which is very sound orientated. And I know that Jeremy's made his, and Su Fung, in fact, this thing I'm talking about was her graphics score that she'd created. I think there are challenges, and I have extreme challenges because I've lost a lot of my sight, and it's now very dependent on technology, these processes of working.
Yeah.
And I've had something today where, I've got to download Teams for some interactive thing that I've got to do. And Microsoft Teams, it's not a program I'm used to. And, I haven't got anybody else here. I'm fully isolated. I can't get people in my studio to come and help me. And anyway, we're all in lockdown at the moment. So I think that there are challenges with how we communicate.
Microsoft Teams. Hate it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I know it's really difficult.
Platform, yeah.
And I just want to say, can you use one of the ones that I know? But that's the one that's being used. And some of the really good things are Zoom had no captioning. There was no accessibility for captioning.
Right.
Everybody's using Zoom, so all of a sudden it's got a little bit better. And I know the same happened with digital technology. I use a lot of digital technology because it extends my sight.
Yes.
It is very, very powerful. But obviously there's that process where you've got to learn how to use it. And if you have challenges or you're not somebody who's particularly into technology, it's very difficult. Yeah. But actually none of us have a choice.
No. I just have to.
Unless we want to be in our studios on our own forever or for the foreseeable future.
Mm. Yeah. It's sort of logistical challenges as well, isn't it? It's not just the collaborative challenges. The question from Zoe, who I know that you collaborate regularly with, she was asking in terms of role models. Do you have any, artists that you particularly, think highly of? Do you have any role models?
I mean, I've got a list of probably 100 artists that goes up and down depending on what mood I'm in. I have a key group of probably 10 artists that I look at constantly. Some of them are alive, some of them are dead, some of them are Renaissance artists. I'm constantly looking at art all the time. And I think I do definitely think that you need to know what else is going on, because at any one time in the world we're all making work, but there will be somebody else making work that looks very like your work. Now you might not see that work, but there's a zeitgeist that means that we make similar work. I met Jeremy Hawkes last year, we make work that looks quite different, but he's probably the closest artist that has the same thought process as me that I've ever met. And to actually just be able to be in a space with somebody who thinks in a similar way to me has been incredibly inspiring, and has been really good for my practice, and really important, asking very challenging questions that need to be asked. And both of us, we have sessions where it's all about, you know, what you're drawing, how you're drawing, what you're painting, what's going on, what's, you know, it's just really, really important to challenge what you do. If you've painted a picture that looks the same many times, you need to start asking yourself why you're doing that. You need to, or drawing the same sort of picture all the time. You know, it's got to change, it's got to evolve, because that's how it works. Role models, I mean, I could start naming so many people. I meet incredible role models through the projects I work on. Sometimes it can be a mother who's got a very challenging family situation, living in very, very difficult circumstances. I met a woman who brought her 3 children across the Mediterranean Sea. The dinghy that they were in capsized, and she felt, she had one of them with her. She lost two of her children for 48 hours, and before she knew whether they'd survived. And then I was able to go, I went to work with her. She told me her story and it all came out. And she's my role model. That woman is surviving daily. So my role models are not necessarily always artists or creative people. They're people who I know are making a huge amount of very, very difficult circumstances. I've also seen individuals make artwork who've never picked up a brush before, but somehow they can communicate on a piece of paper more than any other professional artist I've ever met has. And I'm interested to know, how did they do that? What is it that they've been able to express and can be so open about that often we all fail? I see many great artists and many great drawers, but sometimes they're not making great work.
I think it's something that's going back to that, something about the lived experience as well, and it's and channeling that as well into the work. There's somebody on the call you obviously know. Is it maybe Christine? So great to see you, Rachel. We fondly remember your profound sessions with the students at RIA in Bahrain.
Oh, Riyadh, yeah, that's Bahrain. Hello.
Oh, that's nice. That
yeah, she's got an amazing son called Osman, and her beautiful daughter. But I worked with their amazing. That's a really amazing centre in Bahrain, where there are huge challenges for disabled people in the Middle East. Not that families aren't wonderful with their disabled family members, but there are just challenges because they're at a different stage, maybe how we would have been in the past. So they do, Christine and her whole team do a huge amount of work to make it possible for disabled people to live fulfilling lives in the community in Bahrain. It's really, really important work. And it's a very creative approach as well.
Some Baloo's buddies, yes. Osman is a fabulous artist. And more hearts.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very nice of you to say that.
No, you're getting lots of love. So just going, sort of starting to thread back, we've got probably about 6, 7, 8 minutes left at the most. One thing I suppose, a provocation, I don't know, maybe I'm being deliberately provocative, I'm not sure. Do you think, Rachel, that there is more work to be done within the public around unseen disabilities?
100%. I think it's one of the biggest barriers of all, not just because it's to some degree my own circumstances, but I spent about 5 years exploring old derelict asylum hospitals. I did this huge amount of work, and I went in to find the stories of all these lost souls who'd sort of been lost in the past, who had no voice. And I think I often wondered, why did I make that work? And I often think it was because maybe I could sense that for these people, nobody really understood their situation. You know, mental health issues are often seen in a very negative way. You know, there are many disabilities that people sort of think, well, if you just tried a bit harder, it might go away or it might get better. And I think it is really difficult. I think it's very challenging. And so I think it's really important, maybe as a society, for us to not necessarily judge somebody by just looking at them.
Yeah, and
Whether that's
so obvious, doesn't it? It's such an obvious thing to say. It's what you say to your kids. It's like, oh, you don't, you know. It's so obvious, and yet we all have those unconscious, well, everyone's talking unconscious bias at the moment, aren't they, as well? But we all do, and I suppose we have to all just think, be kind, and just think it's not everything is quite maybe what meets the eye.
And even if somebody doesn't have a disability, or that's not part of their experience, none of us ever know what somebody's gone through on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And to start assuming that somebody's done something, they may seem very bright and cheerful,
yeah,
but that may be nothing to do with their inner consciousness or turmoil. And I think it's just really easy to believe. I mean, often people say to me, gosh, you have a lot of challenges. If I was very open about my current circumstances, it is challenging. But actually, you know, it's something I've lived with for a very long time. Although there are, you know, it gets harder all the time, but you know, I'm not used to it. Whereas somebody who something has just happened to them would find it very difficult to deal with it. So, you know, I've had a lifetime to live my lived experience of it. And so I think that we can't judge how one person might deal with something. For me, trying to, you know, having a practice, that's been something that I've always been able to do. So my health or disability situation has always played second fiddle to some degree to my medical, you know, intense medical situation. Yeah. And it's always been about trying to keep as well as possible so I can keep practicing. And have had amazing medical teams who've enabled me to do that. But it's just that business of how we look at other people.
Yes, yeah. And I know there are, I mean, I'm absolutely, I mean, I am by no means in any way, shape or form any sort of expert around disability. And there are very many fantastic organisations. I'm sure indeed, certainly people who are already on this call who are doing fantastic work in relation and in relation to mental health, but it's just such a huge area that I think there probably does need more resources.
Well, I think also at the moment, you know, there's a lot of resources have been taken away over the last 10-15 years. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, you know, people are finding it very difficult to live the lives we're living at the moment. I mean, you know, I'm okay, really. I've got my studio, I make my work, I can do that every day. And yes, loads of projects have stopped. Things aren't happening the way they used to be. You know, financially, it's a very different landscape. But, you know, I do have this world that I exist in. For a lot of people, everything's gone. And so whereas it might have been somebody who'd never had any mental health problems now has quite severe mental health problems. And obviously there aren't the capacity for medical teams to be able to deal with any of that at the moment because they're dealing with this pandemic. That's what's taking priority. Yeah. I know that, you know, even in my own medical situation, they've had to deal with that rather than other things. So there is a huge amount of struggling and suffering. But I suppose we also have to think about the fact that, you know, we have to look at that hope bit because we've got to find that little bit that drives us forward and keeps us going on those very difficult times. And it's not easy to do that. But obviously that's why I think they go hand in hand.
No, and you know, in terms of making, doing, drawing, sketching, being creative, I think that helps. I mean, I mean, people, Rachel, for people who don't know on the call, did I call it? See again, we're getting into sort of maybe dangerous water here, aren't we? I wouldn't call it disability, but I do have an unseen thing that Rachel knows about. I have actually got very severe OCD. I am fully medicated and I'm fine. I need to keep taking the pills or I wouldn't be. Nobody would know. Nobody would know. It doesn't manifest in the way that people would ever know about it. So it's just having that empathy with other people and thinking about, and I think you know, we've got a couple of minutes left, haven't we, Rachel? But I think you were saying what it is, and I think hope, and I think that there in your work, there is, I don't know, somehow even in some of those, the artwork and the drawings that you do that are exploring, you know, really, like there's that one of the refugee boat ship, and it's just, oh, it's so sad, but there's also something incredibly hopeful that comes through in your work as well, and that really does shine through. I don't know whether it's the where you capture the light or the color or the marks, maybe it's the dynamism, but I think that does shine through in your work, that hope, that spirit comes.
And I also think that I have learnt myself, you know, I think I was resuscitated when I was about 3 or 4 years old the first time, and it's happened many times since. And we won't all survive. We're never all going to survive forever. We know that that's not going to happen. But I have learnt that from sort of probably thinking I wasn't going to live for much longer, I've ended up recovering from very major things. Last year I had very major surgery and was extremely unwell for quite a long time, and probably thought, will I ever walk again? Will this ever happen again? But there is this capacity for our bodies to heal. Not always, but they can. And to try and sort of every day, I just think, right, we've got another whole day here. And I just take it step by step. I'm not thinking about 5 million years ahead or anything like that. I just think about each day. And how can this be an amazing day?
Yeah.
And I think that's all any of us can do at the moment, is just breathe and just enjoy each day.
Absolutely. We've literally got a couple of seconds left, but I mean,
and draw. I left off drawing. And draw. Keep drawing.
Keep drawing. Yes.
Keep drawing.
Keep drawing. Yes. Keep laughing.
Yeah. Keep laughing.
Keep your humour. I know. And there may be that there's people that want to get in touch with Rachel, or if you want to drop us a line at the big draw thing, and I'm sure that we can do this again, can't we, Rachel, in a few months? Yeah,
we will. We will. And we might draw together as well. We've talked about doing that.
Yeah,
I'd love to do a great big draw with everybody.
We can do that.
From my studio. Bring it alive. Get your charcoal and things out, and then we'll draw.
Don't we? Get the cameras in there for noses.
I'm getting it set up. I'm getting it all set up. So we'll do that.
I have to sign off because otherwise I'll go over the hour, and then the team get cross with me because I don't think it loads properly. So
okay.
I would like to thank you very, very much, Rach, for joining us today. As I say, the hearts have just been relentless for you.
Thank you.
Been an absolute pleasure to talk to you as always.
It's lovely to see all of you. Thank you so much.
Obviously, this will sit on here. We'll put it onto YouTube, and just drop us a line if you would like us to put you in touch with Rachel, or you have.
I'd love to stay in touch with everyone.
And for either of us, and I'm sure we'll follow up. Watch this space. We have some plans.
Good. See you all soon. Take care as well. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.